Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast, where our goal is simple: to learn from the best and discover how we can all live a better life, build a more fruitful business, and be more productive. Join us each week as we interview fellow entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and leading experts to discuss everything from marketing secrets to new technology and life as an entrepreneur.
Welcome back. This is your host, Nick Sonnenberg. We're switching it up today. I have Ike Fontaine introducing this podcast with me. Ike is the head of client success at Leverage, has been with the team since basically inception, and he produces the podcast. So welcome, Ike.
I'm here in the flesh, actually live.
Well, I guess people know your voice because you do all the intros, but now what are we doing today, Ike?
I think we're gonna roll a little bit and chat about your convo with Joshua.
Yeah, Joshua Zerkel, Global Head of Community for Asana. That's the episode today. What did you think about the episode?
I mean, I thought this was particularly interesting, specifically around kind of what happens when you put two productivity nerds in a podcast. Because both of you just kind of nerded out over project management, but work management.
Yeah. There's not that many people in the world where you can really geek out on productivity, and Josh is one of them. Actually, I had the pleasure of meeting him in person. We hung out at Asana's headquarters in San Francisco, and really interesting conversation. Great guy, but more so than that, we use Asana internally, and we've totally changed the way that we've used Asana over the last year. Actually, I just became a certified Asana Pro, which is pretty cool. That's what the cool kids
Congratulations.
do. But what's your experience using Asana at Leverage?
I remember first getting introduced to it through a client who was at one time we were doing a lot on Trello. The majority of the company was just,
we were Trello's biggest user, within 6 months in terms of
they had to go out. They had to get more investment because
they were losing
more servers.
How much they had to pay AWS for how much we were paying.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And we had a client who said I don't use Trello, I only use Asana. I remember opening up Asana for the first time and just feeling like I was looking at an alien spaceship.
I felt the same way. I thought it was so complicated. I was like, why the hell does anyone like this tool?
I know. It's how am I going to get anything done? I don't know what even to click on. This doesn't make any sense. But more recently, bring it to present day, you bringing really a project management specialist onto the team, implementing Asana, us doing crazy OKRs and, doing some really great stuff there. I've found all of my personal projects in life are now run on Asana. All of my professional projects with Leverage and so on and so forth are all on Asana. Literally, my life is in Asana now. I've been converted. I think there was this integration time to really understand how you can utilize it, and it actually really gets to the point that you really should have people around to help you through the integration process, because you just can't hop into Asana and just be like, oh yeah, I know exactly how to structure this.
Well, I looked at Asana years ago, and I have to say they've done an incredible job of improving that product over the last few years. To pull off, and also just from a design standpoint, to pull off all the functionality they've pulled off, because I've built a few apps now, it's not easy. I mean, they have world-class designers, but some of the functionality in particular that I find super helpful is the My Tasks I utilize a lot. And you have across all projects, you could be on 100 projects. You could just click on My Tasks and you could see across everything, what are the most important things for you to work on today? You can prioritize it. So I've come up with my own prioritization system where every day I classify anything that was in recently assigned with a due date, and then I move it to either today, upcoming, or later. And then at the start of the day, I have my to-do list essentially, which aggregates across all projects. I read a book recently called Make Time, and they have a concept of a highlighter. So it's every day there's what's your highlighter? What's the one thing that if you did nothing else, you would feel like you accomplished something? So within my today, I created a section called highlighter where I have one thing that I'm going to accomplish for that day, which is a 90-minute type of meatier task where if I accomplish that, I could say I was successful. But then also they have an inbox in there. So It's completely reduced a lot of the noise in Slack for us because now we're commenting on tasks. We are doing project status updates. Like, there's so many reasons why it's a good tool, but like other tools, and this is, what I teach in my private consulting as well as, in my live events, Bullseye, Asana, just like Slack or some of these other tools, it's only as good as how you use it. So if you don't know when to use Asana, you're not being strategic with, when should something be a task versus a subtask, or sections, or do you have weekly sprint meetings and you have kind of a cadence and a way that you're keeping track and status updates, it could just become another dumping ground of noise and stuff that doesn't get, and a reminder of stuff that doesn't get done. So it's a great tool so long as you use it right. And that's
Absolutely.
why it's important to really follow kind of like the best practices. That's why I'm literally writing a book on all this stuff, Come Up for Air, because there's so many ways you could go wrong with these tools. But if you use it right, it can completely change the way that your team operates.
Oh, completely. And just to kind of echo into what people are going to be hearing with the episode, both you and Joshua shared really great frameworks for finding the best tool for you and the business, and kind of structured out all the questions and like how you need to be looking at it. It's totally a thing. Like, it's not a one size fits all box. It's like, I was sitting at the coffee shop yesterday, and I'm on Asana, and I look next to me, and there's this like guy. He's in his probably in his 40s, and he's on Trello, and he's just kind of like moving things around, and he seems like he's really happy. And I'm like, oh wow, that's really great. I'm like, wow, I haven't used Trello in 2 years.
Look, Trello is a fantastic tool. It's Kanban style, so it's very visual with cards. We used it for quite a long time. I think it just matters use case. Nothing wrong with Trello. If you just have like a very simple workflow, it's a great tool. In Asana, you can also do Kanban style views. So you could, if you like a list, you could view your tasks and prioritize things in list. If you like the cards and the boards, you could look at that. It also has great Gantt charts, so you can see kind of visually kind of what's the bandwidth and what's going on over a certain period of time in a Gantt chart. You can create reports. So like, I've saved reports so I can quickly see like, what are all the tasks that this person has completed in the last 7 days. I mean, I could go on and on, but I hope you enjoy the episode. Listen to it. Give Asana a try if you're not, the most important thing is that you have a project management software. If you don't have one yet, I would suggest looking at this one. And if you do have one, great. I hope you're using it right. And I'll leave you with this before listening to the episode. But the number one thing that I find people make the mistake of, and this is more when I privately consult people, is they misuse communication tools for project management tools. And a lot of companies are using text or email or Slack as a project management software. And what I always tell people is, think of it like this. Imagine you were going to take your team camping in the forest. You would need walkie-talkies to communicate, and you would need a map to navigate out of the forest. Asana is an example of a map. So what you're about to listen to is the map. And when you start thinking of it like that, the problem when you start delegating tasks and projects via a communication tool is it can slip through the cracks. You have no way to hold people accountable, know what the status is, make sure that someone followed up and completed something, because a communication tool is just not built for it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Speak to you later. Thank you very much for being on the show today, Josh.
Nick, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
So maybe we could start. What does it mean to be the global head of community at Asana?
Yeah, so global head of community at Asana for me means I get to work on programs that connect people who are passionate about teamwork, collaboration, and productivity with each other and with Asana all around the world. And the way that happens in real life is my team hosts events all around the world, workshops, panel discussions around teamwork and productivity, work management, along with the membership program for people who are advocates for Asana to help give everyone the resources and the tools they need to be more effective at work.
That's awesome. We're going through that program right now, so we're going to be certified in Asana.
That's great.
You helped us with that.
We'll be happy to have you in the program for sure.
And it's such an important role, especially nowadays with all the new technology that's coming out. It's so important that a lot of our clients have no idea about all the latest tools that are out there that can really change change the way their whole company operates.
Mhm.
So it's such an important role that you're filling there to spread kind of the awareness of some of these tools.
Yeah, I find that for most people, it's hard for them because it's not their job to stay up on the current tools, what's the latest, hottest, best, and frankly, how to use and best make use of those tools. So it's helpful that you offer this as a resource to your people of like just showing them tools that you believe in and think are helpful for you and for your work.
Yeah, and also it's not just about telling our clients about the tools, but how to think about them, when to use it, and how to optimize it. Because what I found is, Asana, in my opinion, is the best tool on the market in that category. But if you don't set it up right, you're not going to really get the value. Or if you don't know when to use it, what the difference is between that versus a communication tool. So
Yeah, and the truth is with any tool, especially if we're talking about tools for work and tools for teams, it goes beyond, is this a good tool in and of itself? Because you have to think about, how
right,
do I get my team to buy into using it?
right,
How do I show them value? How do I train them if I'm the one leading this charge? And how do we make it so that we can see the result from having this in place? Like, how do we know for certain that this is helping us and working for us? So there's a lot of factors that go into play with any tool that you're using at work and with a team especially.
totally. A lot of people are like, so what's the best tool for this? I'm like, well, there isn't like a blanket right answer. How big is your team? How tech savvy is your team? Where could you be in 3 years from now? What
Mhm.
other tools are you using? Does that, that might want to integrate with that tool?
Absolutely. There's no right answer. There are definitely leaders in each category of tools that you might use. And within there, you need to really think about, what does my team really need? Where are we going? And what will help us best get there?
No, totally. So, can you give us maybe just a quick backstory? How did you get to this position as global head of community at Asana?
Sure. So my background is in productivity and helping teams learn how to work together better. I did consulting in this space for a really long time. And that led me to Evernote, which is where I was prior to Asana. And I was a super advocate for Evernote. And they actually created the first ambassador program for Evernote with me as the first person. And that actually led me to running that program at Evernote. So I ran global community and customer education at Evernote for quite a long time, for 5 years. And then I ended up coming to Asana a couple years ago and spun up this whole program here around connecting people who are advocates for Asana out in the world. So it was kind of a long path to get here, but I couldn't be happier.
And that's how we met, actually. It's from a mutual connection. Chris Tragonos from Evernote is how we
Yep.
connected. And he spoke so highly of you. So,
Yeah. He and I worked together for years. He's a great guy.
yeah, he's awesome. So, what got you into productivity in the first place?
Interesting, because I didn't really meet a lot of other people who were really interested in doing this. So I feel like I'm the odd man out, or did for a really long time before productivity became a hot topic. In my earliest days of my career, I was always the person that was really organized. And I started out in creative professions. I was a designer for quite a while. And I was always able to manage my work really well and kept all of my resources and tools really well organized and always delivered my projects ahead of schedule. And there's stereotypes around creatives and that they're not organized, but I found that there's a variety of people on the steps of the continuum. But I was always asked by my colleagues to help them figure out how to do it better. And I ended up spinning that off into doing consulting for lots of different industries, not just creative industries, because I seemed to have a knack for it and there seemed to really be a need. And so I honed my skills over many years consulting with various types of businesses, lots of different sizes of companies, and lots of different productivity challenges that they and their teams faced. And so I have a really broad experience now helping people get more organized and be more productive.
What were some of the most common issues with productivity you found when you were consulting?
Interesting, because there were some commonalities, although how they expressed for each person was a little bit different. One of the most common, especially given where I'm located in San Francisco Bay Area, is people were overtooled. They would sign up for lots of tools that promised to solve a particular problem for them, but they would never really fully implement them, or they'd never think about what's the best way to actually make use of this tool to have an impact on my team. So they would end up with lots and lots of tools, each one implemented a little bit, but no clear plan for what was supposed to help them and in what way. So I saw that a lot. Also, I saw challenges with just how people were structuring their time. If we're putting it nicely, most people just didn't. So everything felt very ad hoc for most of the people I worked with. A lot of their scheduling was reactive based on people they worked with or their customers rather than being deliberate about how they chose to spend their time and how to best make use of the time they had available. And I think those were the two most common things that I saw, just like being way overtooled and not being deliberate and strategic about planning time.
So it's mostly tech startups that you were working with?
No, it was really a variety of industries. Even tech startups had problems with being overtooled,
No,
which I thought was really interesting. But I worked with virtually every industry over the course of my long consulting career.
interesting, because I also do productivity and business efficiency consulting, but the clients that I work with are undertooled and they basically use email as everything. They use it for external communication, internal communication, personal communication, project management, documenting, process, like
Everything.
yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely seen this a lot as well. For some people, I've noticed that they have declared like tool bankruptcy and they go back to the bare minimum, which is usually email. And you can manage your work through email. It's definitely not the most effective way to do it. And it usually is hair pulling and tear inducing, but it's possible. There's just better ways to do it.
Totally. I mean, for me, the way I look at all these things is you want to be able to retrieve information as quickly as possible. So if doing everything in email is the best for you to be able to do that, great. But most likely, there's probably smarter ways to be able to retrieve information quicker.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think part of this is being deliberate. Just like with your time, you want to be deliberate about, okay, this tool is for this purpose. Here's how we're going to frame, especially on a team, the guidelines around how we use it, what we call
Yep.
things, cadence.
Yep.
Without those sorts of agreements amongst a team, it becomes extremely messy and ad hoc. Like I've definitely been in organizations myself where in order to communicate with people within the team, I needed to remember each person's preferred method of communication.
Yeah. No.
Not effective at
No.
all.
Yeah. That's why I'm writing a book that's meant to serve as that employee manual that people don't get, which tells you a framework. This is how you should think about the tools. This is the context when you should use a communication tool versus a project management tool, and this is how to optimize them.
Yeah, at Asana, we think of the three C's, which is content, which is where you and your teammates collaborate on creating a new document and something like that might live in Google Drive or Google Docs. Then there's collaboration and communication, which is like Gmail or Slack, where you're talking about the work. And then coordination, which is work management, which is where something like Asana fits in, where you figure out who's doing what by when, you organize the pieces so that when it's time to actually do the work, you and your teammates know what's happening. And I've often found teams focus on one of those pillars rather than solving all of them. And that's where they tend to run into problems.
Yeah. So we have before we started recording, I was talking about my CPR framework, but it's almost identical. Like communication is what you're calling collaboration. Planning is what you're calling coordination, and then your content piece is very similar to what I call resource, which is the documenting of information.
Yeah. All of it's necessary.
Totally. Totally. I think every company, no matter what industry or size, you need those areas, and you need to be clear what the definition of that area is and what type of tool you should be using when you're in that area. So
exactly.
What's your tech stack like at Asana? Are you allowed to share something like that? Like what are
Absolutely.
the tools what does Asana use at Asana?
Yeah, so it varies by team. So I work on the community team and I can walk through the tools that we use. If you work on like a sales team or on success or on support, you use different things. But within my work group, we use Asana, of course. We use Asana for everything all day long. It's our main method of communication. We actually don't use email at all internally. If we're communicating about a project, that happens within the comments inside of Asana, which saves us a lot of time because it contextualizes all of our communication. Then we use Google Apps, Google Suite, so Google Calendar, Gmail for external emails like with customers or clients
Yep.
that I'm working with because I work with people in the outside world. Then Slack and Zoom. So Slack for quick chats with coworkers like, hey, want to grab lunch? Or which meeting room are you in? Or things along those lines. Zoom for video chat, especially we have global offices all over the world. Spend a lot of time meeting with coworkers to make sure we're synced on projects and staying on the same page. So we use Zoom for that. We also, in my world, because I do a lot of work with external people, I want to make it really easy for them to schedule my time if we need to have a chat. So I use a tool called Calendly for that, which lets them book time on my Google Calendar based on my real life, real time availability. Saves me a ton of time from having to do the back and forth, like, when are you free? Here's when I'm free. It's
Yeah.
waste of time for everyone. Then in my team, because we work on community management, we have a community management tool set, the cornerstone of which is called Partner Stack, which is essentially like a mini CRM just for community management.
Hmm.
And then because we host a lot of events, this year we're hosting close to 200, we use a tool called Bevy, which is our event management and ticketing platform.
Gotcha. So we're overall at a high level very similar. Email for external, Slack for internal. If it's related to a project, that should be done on a task or project level in Asana. But there's some gray areas sometimes that people fall into. So let's talk. Do you have a hard set rule when communication should be in Asana versus Slack?
Generally, if it's about a project or a task,
It's Asana.
it's almost always inside of Asana.
Mhm.
And actually, if you start talking about something via Slack, we just convert it into a task using the Asana integration. So the main purpose for that isn't because we're trying to be dogmatic about where communication lives, but it's more so about keeping all the context together. Because if you have your project organized in Asana, it's way easier to have all the communication, the tasks, and the comments about it in that one spot so that anyone who comes into that project can see everything that's going on. And you don't have some element of the communication siloed over in Slack or over in email.
Yep, totally agree. So you call yourself a work management software. What's the difference between that and say the more commonly used term would be project management software? Like what's the distinction in your mind between the two?
For me, I would say the distinction is work management is really about orchestrating all of your work and especially your team's work from everything from the biggest strategic initiatives down to the day to day tasks. Whereas project management is usually very contained to this project for this duration. You can do that in Asana also, but Asana takes it up another level where you can orchestrate and manage multiple projects across many teams. And the work doesn't have to be project based. There can be process based work that happens, there can be ongoing work. And so project management to me, is more limited in scope than work management, which is really about orchestration of all of the work.
Right. And I think also you guys have some really robust functionality where you can create conversations inside of it on on a project, which is not typical functionality in a project management software. So you start combining communication, but in the context of projects in a really
Exactly.
robust way.
Exactly. Yeah. So to me, that's where that contextualization and the value of it really comes into play. Like, for instance, if I'm working on a set of projects around community building and community management, and I want to report out to the company how things are going, each month I can just make a post, an update essentially in the conversations to the entire team. So rather than sending an email notification and maybe an internal newsletter, all of that happens, all of that broad-based communication happens inside of Asana. So it's related directly to the work that it's connected to.
When people get hired at Asana and you're training them on the tool, what are some of the best practices or rules in terms of how they need to be using Asana with the rest of the team that kind of you train people on?
Yeah, so every person who joins Asana gets a fairly intensive boot camp on how to use Asana,
Makes
and
sense.
not just how to use Asana, but how we use Asana at Asana, because
Yep.
we're probably our biggest customer because we use it for everything. Every department uses it. And so within each team, there's pretty robust training on here's how this work group uses Asana. And as new people join Asana, they get an onboarding project where they have every single thing that they need to do during their first 30, 60, 90 days outlined for them within Asana. So just by virtue of them getting started at Asana and getting that onboarding project, they have their own built-in boot camp of here's how Asana is used for this particular purpose. Then they can extrapolate from there other interesting ways that they might be able to make use of it in their own work.
But are there some rules like every task that you create for someone must have a due date as an example?
It's not a hard and fast rule, but that's a best practice. So that's something that we espouse to our customers and something we try to emulate ourselves. We definitely try to make sure that if you're using Asana and you're creating a task, there's an assignee, there's a due date, there's a description,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise there's not a lot of value there. So we really try to make sure people understand, here's why you use Asana for this purpose, and here's how you best use it to do that. And part of that is assigning who's doing what by when.
Right. What are some tricks that you or you've seen your clients do with Asana? I'll give you two examples that we do at Leverage, just to give you some context of what the question means. So, one trick that we do with Asana, I guess you could say, is if we're in the hiring process and we know we want to hire, say, a director of ops, right? It could take 6 months of interviewing before we find that person.
Mhm.
So what we do is we'll create a fake user in Asana, right? So director of ops at getleverage.com, create the user. And we'll, as things come up, we'll start assigning tasks, within the 6 months. So this person doesn't yet exist, but we start offloading tasks to this future person. So then when we hire the person, you just click a button to reassign to the real person, and they have already 100 tasks that they can prioritize, so that they're starting with momentum. So that's one trick. We use a tool called Process Street, which is a process documentation tool, and we do quarterly rotations to stress test the processes. So it's not rocket science. It's not like what are some crazy integrations or automations, but are there some other types of hacks or tricks that are clever, that are more like out of the box, that you wouldn't necessarily think of?
Yeah, so for instance, on my team, we, as I mentioned, do lots of events. Each event has its own project. So let's say that we went to Munich last month and Amsterdam. Each of those had its own project that listed every single thing with a work back schedule that needed to happen leading up to each event. Then to tie all of those projects together so we can see them on a visual timeline, we actually have another project that is like the event plan for the year. And then we have each of those events plotted out on the timeline so that we can see how they all fit together visually. And then we link to each one of those projects from within that master timeline view. So it's very easy for my manager or someone else working on marketing that's trying to align a campaign to an event to see, okay, here's what's happening and where and when, and then dig in deeper to see all of the details of an event, like who's speaking at this panel that the content team might want to capture quotes from, and who's attending based on the attendee list that the sales team might want to spend a little bit of extra time or focus on. So that's one of the things that we do, is really try to, if we have disparate projects, tie them together in some meaningful way. And that can be for all sorts of different types of workflows, not just events, but it's been really, really helpful.
And is that's different than the concept of portfolios, right?
It is, because a portfolio is a collection of projects, and you can now actually do some timeline plotting with those. But this is a little bit more in depth and lets you dig deeper into all of the details of a given event.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that
Yeah.
one.
It's been very, very helpful. Given the sheer number of events that we're doing, it's been invaluable.
Okay, gotcha.
And on there, we actually color code the different types of events. So at a glance, it's really easy to see what's happening.
Yeah, that's one thing that color coding wise, are you guys using that a lot on your projects? Because on a project you can select a color, right? So I guess green is active, red inactive is probably a really common use case of how to use that.
We do, to an extent. I'm not a super huge color coder, but some members of my team are. And if they find it useful, more power. I just personally don't use it beyond like color coding our events like by region or by type. I find that really helpful.
Let's switch gears a little bit. What do you wish Asana did that it doesn't do? Like if you could wave a magic wand and it could have any bit of functionality, what would you love it to have?
Yeah, good question. So I love Asana for all the things that it does, and it definitely helps me organize my work and be more effective in getting more done with less time. One of the things that's in that vein that I could see for the future is more intelligence added, where Asana can notice my patterns of how I work, who I work with, my style of working, and maybe figure out how to help me complete tasks, give me extra oomph in a specific direction that it knows will save me some time based on my patterns. That, I think, is above all the things that I would like to see the most. is really learning about how I and my team work and make suggestions based on that. Help us figure out how to work more effectively. We have some of this in place now with the new automation features that were just unveiled in the last month.
It's awesome
There's a
that you're
lot
talking about
more.
the workflow stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
that's been really cool.
yeah, it's really cool and it's definitely steps in that direction. I'm just looking forward to, do my work for me, basically help me frame my work a little bit more easily, do the things that I don't want to do so that I can focus on the more strategic parts of my work and the real human interactions that I need to have.
One other, not to be like, is it? I just want to be clear. I'm not getting paid for any endorsement with Asana. I just really like the tool. So one thing that I really like too is I like that you guys restrict only one person can own a task, because if more than one person owns something, no one owns it. And when you work with a tool that you can have multiple people on the face of a task, it's hard to hold people accountable. So that's
Yeah, philosophically, that's something that is part of how we think about people should be doing their work. That concept of, and we get questions about this at every single workshop of like, how do I assign the same task to different people? No one's going to do it. Everyone's going to think the other person was responsible. And so that really having one person responsible with a specific due date and making it really clear that it's theirs and they own it is really critical. Not just whether you use Asana, but even if you don't, you want to make sure you know who's doing the work and when they're doing it and that they're aware of that. And that concept is really powerful.
And is there some, I guess if people go to the website, there's some basic training material that you suggest everyone goes to look at. If someone's listening right now and they don't have any work management or project management tool and they want to get started and learn more, where would they go to?
Yeah, I think the best place to go is actually Asana Academy, which you can just Google Asana Academy and you'll find it. Essentially, that's self-paced training that will give you as much of the ins and outs of Asana as you want, whether you're just getting started or are a power user. That will help you think through, here's how I should structure my projects, here's how I work with my team, here's how I get us up and running really effectively and successfully. Asana Academy is great.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and I've taken a look at it the last few days, and I'm honestly impressed what you guys have built
Thank
with
you.
that.
Yeah, the team that works on that has spent a lot of time not just thinking through like what people need to learn, but how and how most effectively to teach it.
Yeah, no, it's great. So, what does a typical day look like for you, and how do you stay productive?
Yeah, a typical day for me is fairly busy. I spend a mix of my time working directly with my team on their individual projects and their initiatives, and part of my time is spent working more strategically with some of the leads here at the company. Also, I travel a lot for events, so about 40% of my time is spent on the road. So I have to be very careful about what I work on, when, and where. So I have a practice every morning where I go through my task list in Asana, prioritize what I'm going to be doing that day and specifically when. So the first half hour of the day or so, I spend cleaning out all of my various inboxes, making sure that I have tasks for all the things that need to be actioned, and then put time on my calendar for each one of those tasks that I need to work on that day. At the end of the week, I review what I've completed and make my bigger priority list for the following week.
Sounds pretty similar to mine, actually. So in Asana, what's fantastic is you have that My Task button, and then it has some preset, today, upcoming, later. So you open it up and you prioritize what should be in the today bucket, basically across all projects.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm very big on using my tasks.
Yeah,
I'm in there all the time. And
same.
when new tasks get assigned to me, I see them there. So it's a very good clearinghouse for me of here's what I need to work on, here's what I can delay or defer, here's what I can delegate and schedule the things that really need to get done.
How how do you guys do sprint planning on your team? Do you guys have a custom field with some concept of points or level of difficulty? Like how do you know on a sprint how much you can move from your backlog to your doing?
Yeah, good question. So on my team, we don't use sprints. Within marketing, we don't use sprints. I think on some of the development teams, they do, which that concept for planning is much more closely related to development than it is for marketing or sales. However, there are features in Asana like custom fields where you can assign values of any type, but including like points that you've scoped. So I think the teams that use Asana for sprint planning do that essentially. You can also use that in conjunction with a new feature called workload, where you can see each team member's basically load based on the number of points that they've been assigned or the number of hours that it will take for them to complete a certain body of work, and then redistribute the work based on who's really busy and who isn't. On my team, we don't work that way. We have a conversation every week at the beginning of each week where we each list out our priorities for the week. And if someone is overworked, we can rebalance it amongst the team live and in person.
Gotcha. Did you guys ever experiment with the workflow tool and just decide
within my team? We
Yeah.
don't, because you need to assign values to each discrete piece of work in order to do that. So for my work and my team, it doesn't necessarily make sense.
Gotcha.
But for other teams, they found it really, really helpful.
It's hard to estimate for your line of work in particular. It's just hard to estimate how many hours something will take.
Yeah, because we're dealing with people and not things or things that we create. We're dealing with human interactions, and some of them are really quick and some of them take a really long time, but all of them are equally unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
It would be very difficult to do that. I have in the past used sprint-based planning for marketing workflows. It just felt like a good solution, but for a different problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've experimented as well. I mean, we do it with the developers, but we haven't figured out a good way of implementing that concept on the marketing side. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I've actually never, and this is something that I could learn, I've just never found a marketing team that uses sprint planning the same way that developers do and use it effectively. I think it's really designed for a different style of work. That doesn't mean that you can't pick a time period and say, here's what we're going to focus on during this time period. That's certainly what my team and I do every single week when we present our priorities for that week. So it's just a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just how can you estimate what reasonably can get done in a period of time?
Yeah. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Especially when your work is somewhat unpredictable.
So what's next for Asana? Like what can you share about kind of what's on the roadmap, or what's the bigger vision with where you guys are going?
I think you'll see a lot more in the coming months. Specifically, the vision of Asana is really around helping teams work more effectively and manage their work however they work and wherever they work from. And some of the things that you've seen come out in the last few months, like workload and automation features, look for more enhancements to these things as we learn more about our customers and how they're using Asana and using these new features. We're learning more about how we can help them do that more effectively. So I would stay tuned for things like that for sure. And specifically from my team on the community side, you can look for more opportunities to get involved and learn more about Asana and other people using it and how you can learn from them. And look for more events. You can always find all of our events if you go to asana.com and click on events. You'll see everything that we have coming up. Next year, we're planning a lot of events in a lot of new cities. So there'll be lots of opportunities to connect with me and the team.
That's awesome. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, Josh. So aside from that, where can people, is that the best place for people to go to find more information?
Yeah, you can go to asana.com, go to asana.com/events or /community to learn more about our community program. You can also find us on social at Asana, or you can find me personally if you go to @Joshua Zerkel.
And potentially you will be coming to a future Bullseye event, TBD, but would love to meet you in person at one of those. And actually next week we're going to be potentially getting dinner. So that's awesome. Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining. This was awesome, and really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leverage Podcast from GetLeverage.com. Please let us know what you think. Rate and subscribe on iTunes. Leverage is an on-demand outsourcing platform that helps small business owners and entrepreneurs scale their business. We have experts that can help set up marketing and sales funnels, your email marketing, podcasts, social media creation, paid media, and much more. Grow your business overnight with a team of experts you can trust to deliver. Accomplish more. Visit GetLeverage.com.